me just say welcome to the Ross District. We are very glad to have the new staff members. Next, we have our guest speaker today, and Kim Nuxall, the CEO of the Nuxall Foundation, is going to come up and introduce Mr. Ty Bradshaw. Kim is a retired teacher. He sat in your chair 10 years ago. He spent 32 years teaching in the Fairfield District, so we're glad to have Mr. Nuxall here, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Ty Bradshaw. So thank you both for coming.
Sir, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, I get back-to-back days. I was at Fairfield's grand opening yesterday, and it makes me reflect on my career as an educator and look out and see you. I got to do some amazing things in my lifetime. Growing up the son of a major league player, I got to meet so-and-so and so-and-so, and I always looked up to them until I got into education. And I went to a whole nother level of reverence. And I mean this sincerely. There is not a more important job on this planet than what you do. So know that myself, my family, our foundation, from the deepest parts of our heart, support what you do and believe in what you do, because I know the impact you can make on children, and that's powerful. I don't have to tell you, our kids need you more than ever. And I guess when I reflect back on yesterday, listening to the four people that spoke at Fairfield's opening, I thought, they all had a story, and it was an amazing story. I wish I could share some of those inspiring stories. But it made me think of our kids. I guess I want you to think of every child that comes in your classroom has a story, especially those that are the difficult ones. And those are the ones I think back on. How can we connect with those kids from the heart, I call it. There's a great saying, you cannot teach them until you reach them. I guess I want you to really think hard. The kids that come in that have the two parents at home that support education, man, they're a breeze. But the ones that don't have the parents, the ones that don't have a father, don't have a mother, have lost someone in their family, they've got issues that you may not know about. So I guess I just want you to think, how can you reach them this year? Really make a difference in their lives. So I thought yesterday, too, for some reason, my mind works in funny ways. Jim Valvano, you're familiar with him, the V Foundation. He had bone cancer. He was a coach. And in his last days, he had a beautiful saying, about a perfect day. I thought yesterday was a perfect day for me. A perfect day to Jim Valvano, even on his last days, was a day where you thought. Boy, we did a lot of thinking yesterday at Fairfield's opening day. Part number 2 he talked about is a day where you laugh. There's some great laughs yesterday. And part number 3 of a perfect day was you cried. And today you're going to have that experience, I guarantee you, from our speaker today. He's someone who's half my age, but someone I look up twice as high to anyone else. I really admire him. And that's why I'm here today to introduce him. I'm here today just to listen to him. And I've heard him before, and I'll hear him again, because I believe in what he's doing and the impact he's making on students, and he will make an impact today on your life. As he's taken a tragedy and he's turned it into something positive. We're all going to have bad things happen to us, and I think that's one of the most difficult things about teaching is, boy, you've got your family and you've got the stuff going on in your family, and you've got to face 25, 30 students in a classroom. And they're not that interested in what goes on at home. They need you right there. So there's nothing, I think, more difficult than that in teaching. It's how you handle the stuff that's going on in your life. But this young man, again, has taken such a tragic thing and done something so positive with it. And I'm not going to spend much more time. I need to get him out here so you can hear him today. The other thing, if I were to introduce him about a month ago, it would be as a former announcer for the Hamilton Joes and Hamilton High School and Miami graduate, doctorate student working at Miami. But today I get to introduce him as the new executive director of the Joe Nuxall Foundation. Please welcome Tyler Bradshaw.
Thank you, brother. Love you. Thank you. Wasn't supposed to cry till at least a few minutes into this thing, and Kim got me there. Kim, thank you so much for all you've done to support me, to really love on our family. I just can't say enough good things about you, and I'm not just saying that now because you pay my paychecks. I'm saying it because I mean it. Kim is one of those just educators of a lifetime that we are lucky to have in our community. And I'm thankful to be able to call him a friend, to call him my boss, my mentor, just so many good things I could say about Kim. So thank you for the introduction. Ross, how we doing on opening day? Good? Good. I'm so excited to be able to be here with you to share my story. I want to thank Dr. Conkle for inviting me. I also want to thank, there are lots of familiar faces in this crowd between Sean Van Winkle, Justin Beck, lots of folks that I knew. In my former career in college admission, which I can tell you, there is no guy happier to be out of college admission than this one right here, because it is getting ugly on that side of the desk, and I'm happy to be doing this, a job I really love. But the one thing I want to say is coming here to Ross High School, those were some of my best memories, some of my most exciting days. The visits got so big because we had so many students interested in Miami. We used to do it here in the auditorium. And I remember like the first time getting up on stage, doing my thing, packing up all my stuff, and I'm like, how in God's name do I get off of this stage? There's no staircase, there's no anything, but it was always just a tremendous experience coming here. And I'm excited to be able to come back with you today to share a story that I don't share everywhere, but a story that I hope at the outset of a new school year, a school year that has lots of opportunity, and also a school year coming off of what was probably, whether you're a first-year educator or a 31st-year educator, probably your most difficult year in the classroom or at home in the virtual classroom that you've ever had. And it's a story about my dad. It's a story about teachers that made an impact on my life and that are still making an impact on my life. A good teacher will teach you something that you didn't previously know. A great teacher can really help teach you how that knowledge can make your life better. But a spectacular teacher will change your life in ways that you might not immediately recognize. And one absolutely spectacular teacher in my life that gave me an assignment, that helped me hold on to my dad, even after I couldn't hold on to him in person, changed how I think about the work that you all do and the work that you'll do this year. I want to introduce you to the most important man in my life. This is my dad, Scott Bradshaw. I'll tell you a little bit about him. My dad and I were similar in some respects, different in many. My dad was a very talented carpenter, electrician. He could do everything with his hands. I inherited absolutely none of that skill whatsoever. I'm the guy who tries to channel that skill set and then breaks stuff, and then you have to call somebody and pay him double to get him to come in and fix the original problem and the mistakes that you made. He worked here in town, relatively speaking. He worked at Matandy Steel. He was a maintenance technician there. A very talented athlete. I also inherited absolutely none of that. My dad was a very good basketball, softball, baseball player. I got into the sports announcing stuff because I figured, hey, if I suck at all this stuff, I might as well talk about guys who can actually do it. And I grew up idolizing Marty Brenneman and Joe Nuxall, which is why this job at the Nuxall Foundation is so important to me. There are very few times where a kid who idolizes a major league broadcaster will get an opportunity to then go out and carry on that legacy and carry that torch forward. This is a true blessing for me. I'll talk a little bit about that job change in a while. My dad, the one thing I hope that I inherited, sense of humor. My dad was a very funny guy. He was the king of dad jokes. His favorite dad joke by far, I used to suffer from headaches quite a bit when I was a kid. My dad was notorious for just coming up and patting me on the shoulder, and he'd say, well, if I had a head like that, it would hurt me too. He had lots of those, but his favorite dad jokes by far were nicknames. My dad had a nickname for everybody, sometimes annoyingly. He was famous for doing that dad thing where you just take the original name and make it sound ridiculous, like my cousin Megan. He would always call her Meggy Weggy, or, something easy like that. My dad always called me Bub. I think that was actually because he wanted to name me Kurt. My mom wanted to name me Tyler. Of course, she won that battle, but my dad always called me Bub my entire life, and that's where the name of the blog comes from. I started a blog, which I'll talk about, called See Ya Bub, and it just happened to be that as I was coming up with the name, and that sounded fitting, See Ya Bub SB, that was my dad's initials, and I thought a great way to pay homage to him. But in the summer of 2001, my dad was the happiest he had ever been because he got to give me his favorite nickname that he would only be able to use for a limited amount of time. That was Freshie. Yes, for my entire freshman year in high school, my dad called me Freshie every single day, multiple times a day. I absolutely hated it, which meant he would do it even more once he found out how much I hated that nickname. But my dad always called me Freshie. That Freshie moniker, though, was actually pretty accurate. I'm only going to put this up for a limited amount of time. If you take cell phone pictures, we will confiscate your cell phone on the way out. But this is actually a picture of me during my freshman year. You can tell how thrilled I was to go on that family BB riverboat cruise down in Cincinnati. We were super excited about that. But the Freshie moniker, again, we're just going to go back to the next picture. You've seen it. My sense of style, absolutely horrible. Orange and red, never a good choice together. But the Freshie moniker was truly accurate because when it came to making that transition into high school, I was an absolute nervous wreck. I didn't know if I could handle the things I had heard about high school, the amount of work, the amount of homework, the intellectual challenge. I was a student who always doubted my capabilities, always doubted whether or not I would be able to be successful. And that freshman year, my freshman year, was actually 2001, which was a pretty monumental year, both in my life and in the life of the country and our society. Freshman year, I had my very first Spanish class. No bueno, that did not go well. I had my very first algebra class, and that went about as well as the Spanish class. I started playing golf my freshman year in high school and learned a whole host of new adult words that I don't use in front of my mom. I also remember the historic moments. I remember being in an art class on September 11th when another teacher ran frantically into the room and turned on the television, and myself and my classmates watched in horror as 3,000 fellow Americans lost their lives senselessly and unexpectedly. But of all the things that happened that year, personally, I am particularly grateful to have been a student in a work and family life class taught by a teacher named Kim Schulteis. I knew from the beginning that I was going to like Miss Schulteis. She had a sense of fun-loving personality that really just made her a joy to be around. My third block of first semester was work and family life with Miss Schulteis, and she had a caring, personable, relatable personality that I immediately knew I was going to relate to. She taught with a simple kindness and a sense of humor that made her immediately endearing to myself, to all of our classmates. And having been pretty nervous about that first semester in high school, I was so appreciative that I would have a teacher who would help guide me through that experience. Over that semester, Ms. Schulteis taught us lots of things. She taught us how to cook. My wife is still grateful for that because I'm able to cook at home and I'm not burning stuff like my dad did. He actually burnt soup one time. I didn't even know from a physics perspective that was possible, but he did. But I was able to learn how to cook. She attempted to teach me how to sew. I think I made something resembling like a lizard. We had a pattern and had to stitch it and stuff it. The sewing lessons didn't necessarily stick around, but more importantly than anything, I remember walking away from that class feeling a level of confidence and a level of confidence in my own ability that I didn't think I was going to have, especially that early in my high school career. And I really attribute a lot of that to an assignment that she gave us right at the outset of that semester. having been pretty nervous about high school in general, I can tell you the assignments, the level of homework, the idea of having to write a 6-page paper. And then you get into college and they're like, multiply that by about 20, right? It was terrifying for a first-generation who would be college student to think about having to navigate these things. But in high school, that foundation was easy to question. That's why I was surprised when Mrs. Schulteis gave us our first assignment. And I'll be very truthful, I was surprised and grateful because I truly didn't have to do anything to get this assignment to work. Mrs. Schulteis gave us a simple handout that explained the assignment. We were to ask a few adults in our lives to write letters to us and about us. They were supposed to write us a letter that would share why they loved us. They would highlight our character, our good qualities, and why we were special to them. Our loved ones would then put the letters in an envelope. They'd seal them. We would bring the letters into class to show them that we had done the assignment. And she wasn't even going to read the letters. We just had to show her that we had the letters in class. I immediately knew who I was going to ask to write these 6 letters. I asked my grandpa Vern and my grandma Sharon, who they're wonderful grandparents and people who are close to me. Our neighbors at the time, who were very close family friends, Sean and America Dooley, I asked them, and they joked about all the embarrassing things they were going to include in my letter, and they did. But I asked them, and of course, I asked my mom and I asked my dad. A week or so later, I collected the letters from each of my loved ones, took them into class, showed them to Miss Schulteis. She checked the box, showing that I got full credit on the assignment. And I returned to my desk, probably wearing Velcro Nike sandals and a short sleeve plaid button down. I was very stylish as a freshman. Again, I have to reiterate that point. But I sat down, took those letters, and Mrs. Schulteis said she was going to give us some time to read over the contents. So if you know me well, you probably know where I went. I'm a bit of a mama's boy, and I opened up my mom's letter first. And also, if you know me and you know Kim and why we work so well together, you can probably guess what I did first. Without even reading the contents of the letter, I immediately started to cry. I'm a pretty emotional guy. And that was the reaction just to seeing my mom's handwriting. I've always been pretty sensitive, and this one hit me, but this was no time for sensitivity. This was freshman year, right? I knew that if I started crying on the 3rd or 4th week of high school, my sense of style, my natural ability to just get lockjaw anytime a girl so much as happened to know I existed, this was not going to go well. I was going to have to start lifting weights pretty quickly to fight off all the butt kickings. But I did, in that moment, what any mature, wise, confident high school freshman would do. I completely chickened out. So I went through the motions. I opened up all 6 letters. I stared at the blank space in the corner of each of those letters, pretended that I was reading, folded them back up, put them in my backpack, and took them home and went through the rest of my day. Letters completely free from any tear stains. But when I got home that afternoon, folks, I have to tell you, I could barely contain the excitement of having the opportunity to open up, to reopen each one of those letters and reading through the words that my loved ones had written about me. I went through each letter, and the tears that I had successfully contained in the classroom shed pretty freely as I read on paper how the people who knew me better than anybody truly felt about me. Those letters were special, beyond special. And I knew that they were going to be valuable. I knew they were going to be important. I didn't know just how important they would be until tragedy flooded my life. Almost 12 years after that date, I got a horrible call that no one ever wants to receive. That there was an emergency at our family home, that I needed to get there quickly, as fastly as I could. I did forget to mention, I'm proud to say that as a 25-year-old human being, I bought my first home flat out. I was able to buy the house. I'm proud of that achievement, right? I failed to mention the house I bought is the one right around the corner from my parents. Apparently I had not watched enough Everybody Loves Raymond at that point in my life to know that was a huge mistake. But it was like, I am mature, I am confident, I am an adult, but there's a good chance I'm probably going to need to borrow your lawnmower. So anyway, I'm right there next to my parents' house. I turned the corner. I walked into the lot where my dad and I had played catch for countless summer evenings since the time I was a young boy. And I knew immediately that something was wrong, more wrong than it had ever been in my life, because that same driveway where my dad and I had played pickup basketball games was flooded with police lights. There were EMTs scurrying around, and I got to the door, and my mom's boss, Tom, was there, and he just grabbed me by the shoulder, and he shook me real hard. And he said, "Tyler," he said, "I need you to be strong." He said, "There's been an accident involving your dad. The paramedics are working to save his life, but we just don't know." The thing that I did not mention about my dad at the outset of this speech is that my dad, for his entire adult life, struggled with mental illness, specifically depression. There were times in his life for years on end when things would be fine. They would be great, in fact. There were also some dark chapters. There were some times where he could not get a handle on his depression. And for a guy who truly could fix anything, to not be able to fix this, to not be able to fix something that would help him be healthy for his family, had to be maddening. I can't even attempt to understand it. As I paced back and forth in the yard, eventually my mom was brought to me. We talked, we hugged, and a few moments later, my grandfather, Vern, who had written one of those letters, emerged from the house. He grabbed me, his first grandson. He grabbed my mom, his first child, and he just hugged us real tight. And he just said, "He's gone." My father, Scott Bradshaw, my hero, my Superman, the man who had given me everything in life, was a victim of suicide at only age 50. I didn't understand how something like this could happen. Suicide was a word that you heard on the news happening to other families, not to ours. Same thing with mental illness or depression. But that was my reality. My heart broke, and I immediately began to cling to anything, any piece of my dad that I still had. Because if I could hold on to his things, I could hold on to him, even if he wasn't there any longer. To feel the love that he had given me for 26 wonderful years. Thank God for spectacular teachers. Thank God for teachers like Kim Schulteis, who saw the bigger picture, who knew that there was more than a set of curricular checkboxes that we needed to satisfy. In the constant buzz and coming and going of family and friends in the days after my dad died, I knew that I would need to find a moment to myself to really find my dad's things, to be near them. So, one evening, a few nights after my dad had passed, I locked myself in my home office, threw open the closet door, and took out a box of precious mementos that I've kept over the years. I shuffled through cards and drawings and photos, and then my chest truly tightened when I saw it. This is the letter that my dad wrote to me in 2001. I still have it. And no matter what tragedy has flooded my life, it is one of the most precious mementos I will ever have as long as I live. I told you my dad appreciated dad humor. He even used the outside of the envelope to try and crack a joke. So up here in the corner, he wrote his full name with middle initial, the address. Remember, he was handing this to me in person, okay? Then he wrote my name with middle initial, and in parentheses underneath wrote same address. And here's where it goes to the next level. In the upper right-hand corner, he actually wrote, no postage required if mailed to same household. I didn't tell you it was good humor. I told you it was dad humor, and that's about as good as dad humor can get. Just seeing his writing on the outside of that envelope was enough to bring me to tears. And in that letter, Dad continued to try and be funny. He told me that he liked me because 2/3 of my name was also 2/3 of his name. He also pointed out that I had captured many of his physical features and as a result had become a fine-looking young man. I would point out to him long after that I had still maintained my hairline a little bit longer than him. Currently, we are 4 years older than my dad was when he lost his hair, but that's why you don't see me turn around a whole lot when I present, because it's getting a little thin in the back. Dad then went on in that letter to share how he admired me for my ability to be compassionate and for my intelligence. He told me that he admired the fact that I was different from most children my age. And for a kid who felt a little different and didn't have the confidence, hearing your dad say that was something he loved about you makes it okay. Dad went on to share many other things in that heartfelt letter, and I sat on the floor of my home office weeping, crying, and praying more than anything that he would just come back. Knowing he wouldn't was tough, but knowing that I would have this special little piece of him to hold on to forever made all the difference. You look for little victories in the aftermath of a traumatic loss, and I found one in this letter. I hugged that letter to my chest on that night, and I've been holding those words from my dad in my heart ever since. Although this victory came in a little envelope, it's been one of the most important lessons I've ever received, one of the most precious family heirlooms I've had that's helped me to find a sense of victory in my grief. It's no secret that teachers don't always get the recognition and praise that they deserve. Can I get an amen from the congregation on that? So I am here on behalf of a grieving family to thank you for the work that you do, the difference in the impact that you have made and that you will make in this new school year. To Ms. Schulteis specifically, I have thanked her numerous times for giving us this assignment. I probably didn't say it to her then, but I should have. She gave me an unbelievably precious heirloom that I'll cherish forever. She gave everyone in our class a precious touchstone memory. And I hope that my classmates and the many students who have had the privilege of taking part in this assignment over the years have saved their letters. I hope they've treated them with the same reverence that I have. We probably didn't say it then, but I'm saying it now. Thank you to her and for all those other teachers. Thank you for doing more than No Child Left Behind or any other educational mandate might order that you do. But it's not just Ms. Schulteis. It's all the other teachers who were preparing me for my dad's death decades before that tragedy would occur. I am an unabashedly spiritual man, and I believe that the tidal wave of my dad's death was building many, many years before it eventually crashed into our lives. I also believe at that same time that God was positioning people in my life to help build a shelter, a safe place from the onslaught that those waves would bring. And many of those individuals were teachers. I think of my earliest elementary school teachers like Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Hopkins, Mrs. Scrodato, who encouraged me to work hard when things around me were harder. I think of my first grade teacher, Mrs. Albrecht, who stayed with me during lunch and gym class when I broke my finger in a school door, which is traumatic as a first grader. And you all know those school doors are thick. It was easy to feel sad when you're a first grader missing gym class because of a broken finger. But Mrs. Albrecht instead made me feel loved and valued and appreciated. I think of Mrs. Kelly Dish, my 8th grade English teacher, who taught me that reading the stories of others can help me to understand what values I hold near and dear in my own heart. I think of Mr. Grimes, my high school journalism teacher, who pushed me to inquire and to ask questions when mental illness and suicide, topics that I truly didn't understand, nor did I ever think I would have to, invaded my life. That inquisitory and curious style that Mr. Grimes helped me bring to our high school newspaper helped me to understand how many people in our society are truly hurting and truly suffering. I think of Mrs. Janie Wilson, a true spitfire, and my AP English teacher my senior year, who fostered my love of writing. She forced us, against our will, to write polished essays about books like Moby Dick and plays like Death of a Salesman in just 45 minutes. And after losing my dad, writing has been one of the most therapeutic practices that's helped me process my grief and put tangible words to very, at times, intangible feelings. It's teachers like my high school physics teacher, Mr. Rick Loffman, who every single day would start class by sitting on top of his desk and reading us a character-based story from a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. He taught us that we were there to learn physics, but that if we didn't first develop a heart for wanting to help others, any knowledge we had gained was all for naught. It was teachers like Kim Young, my senior AP government teacher, who just the summer before the school year started was diagnosed with an aggressive form of brain cancer. Having to undergo invasive and exhausting treatments, it would have been easy for Mrs. Young to say, yeah, I'll pass on this year. But instead, she refused. And you want to know what she said when she told us why? Because she refused to miss an AP government class during the year of a presidential election. That's a government teacher for you. It's teachers like my college public speaking professor, Carol Schulman, who asked me to stay after class the first time I gave a speech in our Com 135 class at Miami. And after confessing to Carol that my biggest fear, right below speaking to girls, was speaking in public, Carol asked me if I'd ever thought about a career in public speaking. She entered me into a public speaking competition, coached and mentored me every single day, and eventually helped me find my love of sports broadcasting, which I've done in our community ever since. It's educators like Dr. Bob Rusbassen, longtime dean of students at Miami University, Hamilton, who encouraged me to recognize my leadership potential, helped me to understand the importance of civility, and in my deepest moment of need, after finding out my dad had passed away and saying I needed to see Dr. Bob, being one of the first people on the scene to comfort me and to console me. And although I never had him as a teacher in the classroom, and I'm not going to look at him because we'll both start crying, and we'll be here all day if that happens, it's educators like this man sitting over here, Kim Nuxall, who to this day continues to teach me more about character and how to treat others than I thought any one person could ever know. Every year, I dread the anniversary of my dad's death. We just had the 8th anniversary of his death just 2 months ago. But every year, I find comfort in the fact that knowing a man like Kim Nuxall, who knows the pain all too well of losing a beloved father, calls me to check in, to tell me how he can't believe my dad has been gone as long as he has, and who just offers to be there with me emotionally to support and guide me through my grief. It is teachers, dear friends, teachers, who prepared me to deal with the insufferable difficulties of this life. And it's still teachers who are guiding me through it in every moment thereafter. It is teachers who taught me lessons that are still guiding me now. Those teachers helped me to navigate change in an ever-changing world, and after my dad's death, there sure has been a lot of change. You heard from the start that just recently I left a decade-long career in college admission to become the executive director of the Nuxall Foundation, an organization that's near and dear to my heart. Not just because I idolize Joe, but because what's being done in his memory as a result of the man he was. It's because I had teachers who taught me the importance of giving back and creating a community full of opportunity for those who deserve it that I took this role. It's because my dad taught me that it's good to make money, but to never let the money make you. My dad had a heart for special needs individuals. Now, helping to move Joe Nuxall's legacy forward, particularly at the Miracle League fields, is a lifelong dream. I often sit at the fields, as I know Kim does, and I think how wonderfully happy my dad would have been just to be there with all of us. But in helping that community of great people, I'm carrying on his legacy along with Joe's and his kindness that he showed to so many people. You talk about a miracle at the Miracle League fields, here's an even bigger one. I got married in 2019. My wife is so far out of my league, we're not even playing the same game, folks. She is intelligent, she is hardworking, she is dedicated, and smoking hot, too. Like, if you can't tell from the picture, like jaw-dropping. Our wedding day was beautiful thanks to her, as you all know in the crowd. I did about 3% of the work involved in that entire wedding. But as I stood at the front of that church to make lifelong vows to the woman I love, I couldn't help but look down to that seat in the first pew where my dad would have been. He would have absolutely loved Paige. And having the same sense of humor that he did, the two of them would have totally ganged up on me all the time. It would have been awesome. But I had teachers who taught me that we can have our lives move on without ever moving on from the loved ones who shaped us and guided us. My wife and I actually just 3 months ago welcomed our first son into the world. I am not the guy who would try to win over a crowd by putting pictures of his newborn son on the screen for you to gush over. I'm the guy who puts 4 of them. Take a look at this guy. Isn't he cute? Oh, wait, it didn't come up. Look at that. He's adorable. And he looks nothing like me. It's fantastic. Blonde hair. Look how sweet. Got a little miniature bed. He's got this like $9,000 swing you can put him in that supposedly mimics his parents. They do the most ridiculous stuff to him in these newborn shoots. He's never slept like that in his entire life until the lady was taking pictures of it. I absolutely love, more than anything, being Jackson's dad. My son's name is Jackson Scott, named after my father. And I know that one day, little Jack is going to come to me, and he's going to ask me about his grandpa. He's going to ask me about his father. And in that moment, I'll go back to the lesson that Mrs. Schulteis taught me through that letter, and I'm thankful. Because I had loved my dad, I'll be able to tell Jackson about him. I'll also be able to show him the type of man my dad was and how he felt about me, his family, and how he would have felt about him. My dad would have loved that little boy. And that letter shows it. I hold on to that little boy, and because I had teachers who helped me think through feelings bigger than any lesson plan, I think about my dad holding on to me. I'm able to grieve in a way that's positive and build something up rather than tearing the world around me down out of anger or hurt. For that reason, I'll be sure to write letters to my son frequently with an open heart, and I have a great teacher to thank for that. I have 5 more letters in my closet. All 6 of my letters are important. But fortunately, I've never had to go to those other letters with the same desperation that I felt on the night I sought my dad's. But I know, unfortunately, those days will come. There will come a day when I'll have to say goodbye to those other 5 individuals. And knowing that I'll always have a piece of them to cherish in my heart makes life just a little bit easier. I have chosen to keep much of the contents of my letter from my dad private. It's a sacred heart-to-heart conversation between a father and a son, and there's something strangely precious about that confidentiality. And I want to thank you all for respecting the privacy of a hurting son. But I will share one piece of my dad's letter with you this morning as I start to wrap up. I know I'm a little bit over time, but I got the mic, and you can't take it away from me without tackling me, because it's one of these ones on my ears. At the end of my dad's letter, right before he told me that he loved me, he wrote this: I have no doubt that you will excel in all areas of your life, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I hope that sometime you will have to write a letter to your mother and I for extra credit. It's nice to see it on paper so that you can read it from time to time. I love you, Dad. Yes, Dad, it certainly is. And I'm sorry that I never wrote you that letter. I'm ashamed to admit that in the midst of my self-absorbed freshiness, I never got around to writing my dad a similar letter, and it hurts my heart to know that the letter I would write to my dad was not the one he hoped for, but one to include in his casket at his burial almost 12 years later. I may not be a student anymore, but I'm still learning. And it's my teachers who have taught me so much, but most importantly, they taught me to live a life full of love, compassion, and care. I've done a better job of writing and telling my loved ones how much they mean to me, and that, more than anything, is why I'm here this morning, to tell all of you thank you, and to let you know that the seeds you'll plant with your students this year will grow long beyond your tenure in a classroom here at Ross. To tell all of you that your work matters and that it makes an unbelievable difference. To tell you that when the days are long and when the spirit feels weak, keep pushing, keep encouraging, and most importantly, keep teaching. In your field, you are inundated with data, a push for test scores, a desire to satisfy state curriculum requirements that have been designed by people who have never set foot in a classroom their entire life. Can they fire me for saying that? I don't have a job with you all, so I guess not. I'm not telling you to abdicate your duty to those important measures or to break the law. What I am telling you is to realize that the work you are doing at the soul level with your students is often far more important and far more lasting than any number or mandate could possibly measure. I'll take it. All you got to do is get like 2 or 3 to clap, and then the rest of them will just go because they feel guilty, right? This district, our community, and all of our lives are better because of who you are and what you do. And today, after a year that could have scared many teachers away from the profession, I encourage you to keep after it. At the urging of Kim Nuxall, I recently watched an ESPN documentary on Freddie Freeman, who's the young phenom first baseman for the Atlanta Braves. For those of you who don't know his story, Freddie, the youngest of 3 boys, lost his mother to melanoma when he was only 10 years old. He nearly lost his father 2 years later to a heart condition that thankfully the doctors were able to catch in time. He and his wife struggled with infertility, and at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Freddie and his pregnant wife were both infected with, at the time, a very unknown disease, leaving Freddie's body ravaged with about 104.5 fever. In that documentary, as Freddie reflected on all the difficult chapters of his life, he talked about the idea of the game of baseball and those people who supported him as providing emotional medicine to his soul, helping him weather the storm. I would like to think that that analogy perfectly describes the work each and every one of you are going to do during this school year. Each and every morning, you are providing emotional medicine to your students who might be dealing with academic struggles, behavioral issues, or mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, or any others. Each and every morning, you are providing much-needed assistance to those broken and hurting individuals who walk through your doors, treating their souls in ways they couldn't imagine. And like any good doctor, you're also treating them and helping them to fight off disease and illness in the form of tragedy that may come down the road. The benefits of the medicine that you all will provide may not be fully realized until months, years, or even decades after these moments that will occur this year. And boy, is this more timely now than it has ever been at any point I've ever given a similar talk. In the aftermath of a global pandemic that has taken far too many lives, students need your emotional medicine now more than ever. To those students whose parents have lost jobs, income, or housing, you might be their safe haven. To those houses filled with conflict between parents or consumed by the palpable sense of animosity that seemingly pervades our society, you might be the person who soothes their deepest wounds. And with mental illness on the rise across nearly every single demographic that we can count, you may be the one provider of emotional medicine who can start your student on a path towards healing. Remember, you're in this for the long game. You're in this for those students who, like me, are being taught lessons for the future that they didn't even know they'll need. Our world desperately needs a physical healing that physicians can provide, but just as important, our world is crying out for an emotional healing that only you can provide. That healing starts now, and it starts with all of you in this very moment. Keep changing lives, even if the end game is years or decades down the road. I hope you'll hear a thank you from more than me, because, in the words of my dad, it's nice to see it on paper or to hear it from time to time. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for letting me share my heart, and God bless all of you in this new, exciting school year. Thank you again.